To provide contextualized guidance, we are going to look at the IES practice guide for reducing behavior problems in the elementary school classroom. As we look at this guide, we will make connections to your work of installing an MTSS in your school and or district or charter. You can access the entire report by following the link to this PDF document. Where are we headed? There are 4 different sections for this recorded content. We'll start with resources and a quick introduction. Then we'll delve into an overview, providing important background information. Next, we will go into the practice guide's 5 recommendations. This guide was written in 2008. Since this time, the research space has continued to grow, strengthening each of these recommendations. Within these recommendations, we'll make some connections to the work you're completing within your MTSS training. Finally, we will conclude with some guiding principles throughout these recommendations. You will use or can use 2 resources. One is this electronic resource here, and the second resource is a PDF version of the entire practice guide. As we look at this guide, you will notice that this guide is written for elementary school educators, specifically both school administrators and district administrators. You'll also notice that many of the recommendations are to support teachers. So also this guide is certainly written to help us in supporting our classroom teachers. This guide includes concrete recommendations. It actually has steps for us to be able to complete these recommendations. And each of these steps is then followed with common roadblocks and suggestions to help us work through these different roadblocks. If you are looking at the PDF version of this IES practice guide, the following overview is provided on pages 5 through 7. Most of the attention given to school improvement is academic in nature and focused on curriculum, instructional strategies and interventions, or services for struggling learners. However, even after addressing these needs, barriers still remain for some students. An estimated 1/3 of students fail to learn because of psychosocial problems that interfere with their ability to attend and engage in instructional activities, prompting a call for new directions for addressing barriers for learning. These new or now approaches go beyond academic instruction and intervention. We know that we can enhance teaching and learning by explicit academic and behavioral instruction. In many schools, general education elementary classrooms are generally orderly, teacher-student and student-student relationships are positive, and teaching and learning go on without major disruption. Teachers in these classrooms recognize the importance of preventing significant behavior problems and are effectively using fundamental tools, engaging instruction, well-managed classrooms, and positive relationships with students. Certainly, this is our work in core. These prevention pieces are always the starting point. However, some teachers have a class in which one or a few students exhibit persistent or significant problem behaviors, those that are disruptive, oppositional, distracting, or even defiant. Sometimes, when a number of students in a classroom demonstrate such behaviors, it can create a chaotic environment that is a serious impediment to learning for all students. In these cases, teachers have exhausted their classroom management strategies without successfully eliminating the obstacles to learning that problem behaviors pose. The purpose of this practice guide is to give teachers additional tools to help them deal proactively and effectively with behaviors that seriously or consistently fail to meet classroom expectations. This guide offers 5 concrete recommendations to help elementary school general education teachers reduce the frequency of the most common types of problem behaviors that they encounter among their students. Recommendations begin with strategies that teachers can immediately use on their own. These are recommendations 1, 2, and 3, then broaden to include approaches that involve resources from outside the classroom. Teachers encounter situations where they need guidance, expertise, and support of parents and other teachers or behavior professionals, such as school psychologists or behavior specialists in the school or community, and that school administrators play a critical role in enabling mentoring and collaborative opportunities for staff. This is recommendation number 4. We also acknowledge that the social and behavioral climate of a classroom can reflect the climate of the school more broadly, and we address the contributions of school-wide strategies or programs for improving student behavior, which is recommendation number 6. Fundamental to these recommendations is the notion that behavior is learned. Students and our adolescents' behaviors are shaped by the expectations and examples provided by important adults in their lives and by their peers. In the elementary grades, general education classroom teachers are arguably the most important adults at school for the large majority of the students. As such, they play a critical role both in proactively teaching and reinforcing appropriate student behaviors and in reducing the frequency of behaviors that impede learning. Accepting responsibility for the behavioral learning of all students is a natural extension of the responsibility for the academic learning of all students that general education teachers exercise with such purpose every single day. The goal of this practice guide is to help teachers carry out their dual responsibility by recommendations shaping and managing classroom behavior so that teaching and learning can be effective. Next, let's look at some common principles. The first common principle that you will see throughout these 5 recommendations is the idea of the importance of relationships. We know that schooling is intricately social, and that adults are learning from other adults, students are learning from adults, and students are learning from their peers, and that this learning is happening across all different settings within our schools. In the classroom, positive teacher-student interactions are at the heart of the recommendations regarding modifying classroom environments and instructional factors to improve student learning. Associations have been found between positive interactions with teachers and increases in students' social skills, emotional regulation, motivation, engagement, cooperation with classroom rules and expectations, and academic performance. Teachers show the warmth, respect, and sensitivity they feel for their students through small gestures, such as welcoming students by names as they enter their class each day, calling or sending positive notes home to acknowledge good behavior, and learning about their students' interests, families, and accomplishments outside of school. Teachers also can help students develop peer relationships by having them work together, thereby learning to share materials, follow directions, be polite, listen, show empathy, and work out disagreements. Fostering students' social and emotional development can improve their interactions and attitudes towards school, thereby reducing problem behavior. A second common principle is the importance of cultural competence. This is important in developing positive relationships in the school and community context. As our school and community populations become increasingly diverse, all school staff are challenged to learn about, become sensitive to, and broaden their perspectives regarding what may be unfamiliar ways of learning, behaving, and relating. Teachers can establish an inclusive classroom environment through practices such as using and reinforcing language that is gender neutral and free of stereotypes, selecting curricular materials that reflect and honor the cultures and life experience of students in the class, encouraging and respecting the participation of all students in classroom activities, and holding high expectations for all learners. School leaders can be proactive in supporting opportunities for expanding the cultural competence of staff through a vigorous, ongoing, and systemic process of professional development that involves building trusting relationships among school staff, taking on issues of personal culture and social disparities, and engaging the entire school community in creating a welcoming environment for all students and their families. The next common principle is student development. The panel that has written this IES practice guide recognizes the need for and ability of school staff to translate these recommendations into actions that are appropriate to their specific context. One clearly important contextual factor is the age and developmental stage of the students with whom these teachers work. The ways that recommendations involving rewards for positive behavior are carried out, for example, will necessarily look different in first and fifth grade classrooms because different forms of motivation are appropriate to students' developmental stages. Schools in large urban districts often encounter different kinds and intensities of behavior issues than schools in affluent suburbs and have different forms and levels of resources in and outside the school to address them. The panel honors the insights of school staff and understanding what will work in their schools, classrooms, and communities. Thus, recommendations emphasize processes and procedures that can be adapted to a wide range of contexts rather than providing specific recipes that may have limited applicability. The last common principle, and you will not be surprised, is data-driven. This means having current, timely information about student behavior problems and successes at the school, classroom, and student levels, such as where and when the behavioral hotspots occur in the school and during the school day, which classroom instructional periods or transitions are associated with increased behavioral disruption, and which students exhibit the most. Challenging behaviors and when they are most likely to occur, and what strategies teachers have found to be effective in improving classroom behavior. Without a solid foundation in these kinds of data, interventions might not just be ineffective, but might even exacerbate the problems they are meant to solve. Observation and documentation of student classroom and school behavior challenges can be invaluable in targeting resources and changing strategies to improve behavior at school. Monitoring the effectiveness of strategies by continuing to collect and review data also can support continuous improvement to achieve maximum results. Challenging behaviors are learned over a long period of time. Acquiring positive behavior also takes time. Monitoring progress and celebrating small achievements along the way can help sustain the efforts needed to bring success. Now let's look at recommendation number 1. When you click on this link, this is the page that will appear. Under recommendation number 1, click on what will say Show More. This information reminds us that every teacher experiences difficulty with managing student behavior at some point. Research tells us that successfully changing the problem behavior is connected to 2 things: understanding what prompts the behavior, or the antecedent, and what reinforces the behavior, the consequence. It's recommended that teachers observe when and where the problem behavior occurs. This information is then used to change the behavior. Understanding what prompts and reinforces problem behavior is a powerful tool for preventing and reducing negative behavior. Gathering information on specific behavior, the effects on learning, and when, where, and how often it occurs. This helps us to understand the underlying purpose or function of the problem behavior and is foundational for effectively changing the problem behavior. Now let's make some connections to our MTSS content. In Module 2.4, you will go deeper with understanding problem behavior. Sometimes, because we lack background knowledge on how behavior is learned, we actually put consequences into place that keep the problem behavior happening, which is exactly what we do not want to do. Building our background knowledge will help us to better align interventions for behavior and social emotional skills, better equipping us to support all staff to support all students in doing school. Now let's look at recommendation number 2. When you click on this link, this is the page that will appear. Then you can click on Show More underneath recommendation number 2. This information reminds us that effective classroom behavioral interventions are connected to altering or removing triggers. Triggers result from a mismatch between classroom setting, academic demands, and student strengths, preference, or skills. So how do we do this? Teachers reduce the likelihood of problem behavior by revisiting and reinforcing classroom behavioral expectations, rearranging the classroom environment, schedule, or learning activities, and/or individually adapting instruction to promote high rates of engagement and on-task behavior. This recommendation points to classroom conditions or activities that teachers can alter or adapt to change problem behavior. When teachers understand behavioral hotspots like the timing, setting, instructional activities, they can proactively develop class-wide and individual student strategies, such as instructional groupings, seating plans, order and pace of reading and math instruction. So how will this connect with our MTSS content? Certainly you're going to be going deeper with this in Module 2.4, and we're really excited to share a resource for you that is called Supporting and Responding to Problem Behavior. This resource is a great tool in terms of thinking about classroom management. And this is from pbis.org. And from the Ideas That Work from the United States Office of Special Education Programs. So really quick, I wanted to show you a pretty awesome graphic organizer that I know we were really excited about. So this is thinking about the foundations, and so these would be some of the things that we're talking about in terms of things that I may be able to alter as a classroom teacher. The great thing about this resource as you get into it is these are each hyperlinked, and it'll take you to another table that helps you to think about what it is that we're talking about. You'll see some elementary and some secondary examples in terms of applying this recommendation. You'll see some non-examples in terms of what you wouldn't want to see when you're looking at this idea, and then also the connection in terms of what's the research background that supports this. Now let's look at recommendation number 3. This recommendation highlights both teaching and reinforcing or providing feedback on new skills to increase appropriate behavior and preserve a positive classroom climate. Just like teachers provide academic instruction, we are also talking about behavioral and social skill instruction. Through this instruction, teachers help students with behavior problems learn how, when, and where to use these new skills. Increase the opportunities that students have to exhibit appropriate skills and preserve a positive classroom climate, and manage consequences to reinforce and support students' display of positive or the replacement behavior and adaptive skills. Some key points. Just as poor academic performance can reflect deficits in specific academic skills, some students' failure to meet behavioral expectations reflects deficits in specific social or behavioral skills. Just as explicit instruction can help students overcome some academic deficits, explicit instruction can help students learn the positive behaviors and skills they are expected to exhibit in schools. Showing students how they can use appropriate behaviors to replace problem behaviors and consistently provide positive reinforcement, what we would also call feedback, when they do so, can increase students' chances of experiencing social and behavioral success. Now let's make some connections to our MTSS content. In Module 1.2, you looked at defining your core, which included your academic, behavioral, and as a part of that behavioral core would also include social skill instruction. You also reflected on how that students were doing and how that teachers were doing in terms of teaching and reinforcing these new skills, and you would have done that work in Module 1.3. Now we're going to go deeper with this work in Module 2.4, and one example of how that we'll be going deeper with this work is the resource that we just showed in connection with recommendation number 2, which is the resource on supporting and responding to problem behavior, which is linked here. Now let's look at recommendation number 4. Recommendation number 4 highlights the importance of relationships within the school. When dealing with problem behavior, the classroom teacher makes connections with others in the school, including professional colleagues and students' families, for continued guidance and support. Social relationships and collaborative opportunities can play a critical role in supporting teachers in managing disruptive behavior in their classrooms. Teachers can draw on these relationships, finding ways to address the problem behavior of individual students, and consider parents, school personnel, and behavioral experts as allies who can provide new insights, strategies, and supports. So what are some highlights of this recommendation? Recognizing the collective wisdom and problem-solving abilities of school staff, the 4th recommendation encourages teachers to reach out to colleagues in the school, other classroom teachers, special educators, the school psychologist, or administrators to help meet the behavioral needs of their students. Similarly, by engaging family members, teachers can better understand their students' behavioral issues and develop allies in intervening both at school and at home to help students succeed. When behavior problems warrant the services of behavioral or mental health professionals, teachers are encouraged to play an active role in ensuring that services address classroom behavior issues directly. Certainly, the school counselor and/or a school social worker could be additional allies in this work. So what is some connections to our MTSS content? Certainly the work that you have done around teaming structures, and then also the work that you'll be getting into with 2.4 around building your intervention plan and that system that could be certainly helpful with carrying out this recommendation. And another important piece of this would certainly be the communication plan work that you have done. So this will be communication both within the school in terms of various stakeholders, and then also external communication with families regarding your MTSS, and also when it's time that you're engaging with individual parents or a particular family, what that communication protocol and support looks like. So next, let's look at recommendation number 5. Classroom teachers, in coordination with other school personnel like administration, grade level teams, and special educators, can benefit from adopting a school-wide approach to preventing problem behavior and increasing positive social interactions among students and school staff. This approach requires shared responsibility, especially for administrators who establish and support consistent school-wide practices and the teachers who implement these practices. The 5th recommendation reflects the understanding that a teacher may be more successful in creating a positive behavioral environment in the classroom when there are also school-wide efforts to create such an environment. Just as teachers can document and analyze the nature and context of behavior problems in the classroom, school leadership teams can map the behavioral territory of the school and use the information to develop prevention strategies and select and implement school-wide programs for behavioral intervention and support when needed. This 5th recommendation reflects the understanding that a teacher may be more successful in creating a positive behavioral environment in the classroom when there are also school-wide efforts to create such an environment. Just as teachers can document and analyze the nature and context of behavior problems in the classroom, those school leadership teams mapping out the territory of the school and using their school-wide data can help to all classroom teachers to implement a more positive environment. So let's close with making some connections with our MTSS content. I imagine you're already thinking this, but certainly this would be work that you have already started with your selected schools from the work that you engaged in with Module 1. And we are so excited now for you to go deeper with Module 2.4.